Good morning, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of Power Hour this morning. My name is Sean Ryan. I'm hosting in the background today, and most of the heavy lifting is going to be performed by Ryan McAuliffe, one of our sales engineers. One note before we get started today is that we are still having our Power Hour t-shirt giveaway. We have plenty of stock left, and so anyone who is interested in one of these t-shirts merely has to send us an email with your mailing address and a size, and we would be happy to send one of those off to you. Again, I'm going to be in the background today answering any questions. Please utilize the toolbar on your viewing window to send in any questions, and we will either try to get those answered either live or in a post email as a follow-up afterwards. One thing I do want to point out today is that we have a few polls that are going to be performed as well, so please do keep an eye out for that. We're going to have a little interactivity as we go through today's presentation. But with that, I think we're going to be switching over. I'm going to hand the mic over to Ryan, and he is going to be presenting today's webinar.
Good morning, folks. So the idea of this is just to explore what we're calling IT-OT integration. There's a couple of other terms like IT-OT convergence. From the OT side, IT-OT takeover or IT takeover for the OT. We're just going to go basically over a few things like the reasons behind it, some of the pitfalls that I've seen, and some of the benefits that I see as well. I know the benefits, especially coming from the OT side, look to be slim, but I hope to provide at least one example of something that can be a good thing, a good outcome for operational technology personnel. Then we're going to cover the just a brief relook at the use of LDAP and Active Directory with Realm in the Orion, and we're going to have a quick Radius update. So who am I? I am a former transmission network operator, SCADA systems administrator. I did dabble a little bit in distribution network operators, but it was more on the transmission side. I did that for 10 years. I was the technical lead of the most recent SCADA Master Station replacement project, which was a little bit of fun. The last 2.5 years while working for Western Power in Western Australia, we did undergo an IT-OT integration, which, you know, for the most part was messy, but by the time that I left, it was kind of running smoothly. After that, when I moved to the US, I worked for an IT software development firm for 4 years. I was formerly ITIL certified. ITIL is a service management kind of framework, and we'll go into a little bit more of service management a bit later. So these are the key kind of reasons that I've identified behind the emerging trend of IT-OT integration. With the expenses, you know, shared infrastructure and employees kind of means less cost of maintaining the systems. With the perception, I think that that CEOs and CTOs and, you know, boards and presidents, they see SCADA equipment and OT equipment and substation networks as kind of servers and enterprise networks. And, you know, most of the time we know that they're completely different and that they have special requirements, but, you know, the top brass doesn't seem to see that. The third kind of main driver, I think, is cybersecurity, especially with ransomware being, you know, completely out there everywhere. Cybersecurity is kind of one of those great leverages that OT can use for IT, because generally they know more about it. They've been kind of securing their networks for quite some time. NERC is probably one of the bigger drivers, especially for the larger utilities. The the compliance on that is pretty stringent. I'm no NERC expert, but I know that IT can definitely help with compliance on that. So with big data, utilities must make financial decisions based on the reliability of the network, the expenditure of the network, and the usage. An example of usage would be you have a substation out there with a transformer that has been overutilized and keeps raising the taps to make sure that it has enough to feed all the figures. Then you can kind of plan ahead and go, hey, maybe we need a new transformer at this substation. The proliferation of OT past substation boundaries. Generally speaking, the substation was kind of the whole domain of OT. It was the substation, then it was the link back to the head office where you had master station access. But with things like pole top reclosers, line monitors, Internet of Things devices, it's extending the network boundary of operational technology. And I think that requires a lot of different various communication gateways that IT generally has more expertise in. A quick note for that as well is we're seeing a lot of smart grid implementations, and I think OT can use IT's help to implement smart grid. With shared purpose systems, I'm talking about things like GIS information for primary asset tracking, and also outage management systems. Outage management systems is kind of like a weird gray zone because you can both get information from outage management from the IT side, and you can also feed into it from the OT side. So some of the pitfalls that I've seen with my experience in IT-OT integration is the cost-cutting measures that IT generally run by. In the beginning, kind of IT was generally tied to departments of finance, and I think as a throwback to that, IT departments are generally kind of more cost-aware than most other departments of utilities. And this can lead to the less availability of like personnel, spare equipment, and uptime of critical systems. I think also that the IT departments, just like their head brass that I was talking about before, they see SCADA and OT as just more computers to deal with. They generally don't understand that SCADA kind of helps keep the lights on for utilities customers, and they're more focused on the customer's IT experience with things, like their websites and their accounting and billing software and their phone networks. I think expectations coming in as well to this, IT kind of when these meetings first start, they kind of expect to just take over everything and be in control of everything. And I think the operational technology folks just look at IT with a side eye and go, no. So I think, one of the biggest things to be aware of is that everyone does have different expectations. With the resistance, and I think, to come from the expectations, there's a big general resistance to from OT to an IT integration, and I think mainly because OT has been doing their systems for so long and they've been doing it quite well in their opinion, and they don't see a need why IT should be involved. I think also that one of the biggest pitfalls is accountability and sorting out, well, okay, who is responsible and accountable for what? Both IT and OT like to be accountable for everything. They have their own isolated systems, and IT wants to look after pretty much everything, and OT also likes to look after everything. And I think drawing the boundaries for accountability can be very complex and lead to some tense discussions and meetings. So these are the benefits that I see for IT, OT integration. Collaboration between IT and OT departments, I think, can lead to meaningful results. OT can harness the knowledge of the IT sphere when it comes to, some more general stuff, like with shared components like networking, servers, PCs and laptops, and things like that. Also, the benefits, I think, for me, was the service management principles from IT being transferred over to. So service management in the IT sphere, it defines a set of principles that enables efficient handling of IT operations for the benefit of customers and stakeholders. And I think applying a service management philosophy to IT systems can make a lot of sense, especially for mid-sized to larger organizations. So the last time I went through this, I just kind of read incident management, problem management, change management, asset management, and patch management. And I'm just going to go through, kind of one example, which I just ran through, well, I'm still running through, of how, those could be applied to a particular incident. So, starting again with the incident management workflow, the incident identification would be the control room or even the SCADA or OT personnel notice a problem. They gather all the details about it with the logging. They can categorize it, meaning, what type of fault is it? Is it a complete loss of comms, or is it an intermittent comms issue or something like that? The prioritization would depend on, what is going on. If it's a complete loss of comms for the whole SCADA, that would kind of be like a high priority. If it was a complete loss of comms, say for an RTU on the SCADA, then that could be like a medium priority. The response is generally handled, if it was a control room calling a SCADA person, generally handled on the call. We're going to be looking into it. The diagnosis would be finding out exactly what was wrong. Escalation, if needed, generally not when it comes to OT personnel. We're kind of, from what I've seen anyway, is tier 1s, 2s and 3s and 4s support. Then it gets resolved by noting everything down in the service management software and then closed. So running through an incident where I see some benefit, I've just got an example, and that's kind of where we're going to run through with the with all the different managements that we saw in the last slide. So imagine an incident where a circuit breaker failed to trip due to an intermittent comms issue. The control room reports that a circuit breaker failed to trip when commanded through web server SCADA. The OT personnel would kind of take down the details, which substation, which circuit breaker, what time, and so forth, and log it into the appropriate software system. Categorization and prioritization. Generally, to me, if a control room would call with a problem, it kind of gets dealt with pretty much straight away unless there's something else major, another major incident going on. The response, if the control room is on the phone and they're calling, then it's generally handled by saying, yep, okay, I understand what's going on, we'll get it fixed. With the diagnosis, the OT personnel could look at the logs on the web server SCADA and the field Orion RTU to find the issue. In this particular example, they don't see a record of a control being issued on the RTU. So they check the communication logs for the web server SCADA system and notice that on the devices screen, the percent successful is slowly decreasing, indicating an intermediate comms fault. With an escalation, generally it depends on the structure of your utility. You may be able to solve it yourself by calling in the communications people, or you may yourself be responsible for the communications. In this example, I'm saying that we raise a comms issue with the party responsible for the communications, and once the communications problem is fixed and the percent successful starts to rise, the SCADA personnel would notify the control room that the problem should be fixed, and then would close it out. So with problem management, it's just another service management term. Generally, if you get a lot of incidences of the same type, you have multiple instances of an RTU going offline, then you can create a problem in, just move that, a problem in the service management software and link all those incidences together, and then send it off for root cause analysis. The root cause analysis will generally then hone in on, okay, we have RCUs going offline, or why are they going offline? And it will also suggest a way to fix the problem. And the permanent fix would either to be raise a change, which we will cover next, or raise a project if it's a major problem, which will probably raise multiple changes to then permanently fix the problem. After the change is completed and deemed successful is when you would then close the problem, and hopefully everything should be dandy. So in our scenario where the substation had a comms issue and the circuit breaker failed to trip, if a similar thing happened, we would raise a problem for it. The OT personnel would raise a problem for it. They would notice that through the incident management process that we've had another incident similar to this. They would basically use the same methods to resolve that incident and then raise a problem. Always finish your incidents first based on your knowledge, and then raise a problem so that you can deal with that later. So with the problem, you would link the first and the second issue, and then in my example, I believe I used that we would send it to the comms department. So it would be the comms department themselves who would do a root cause analysis of the problem. In our example that I've made up, the incidences were resolved by rebooting the network switch on site. The root cause may have been that the switch had an intermittent fault due to a hardware failure. Maybe it got struck by lightning. It was just a little bit weird. I've seen that many times. The permanent fix would be to replace the switch with a new one, which then kind of leads on to the change management. And the change management is to ensure that the operators can lose visibility, of this other that the RTU, or like the device in the field, for X minutes, or however long it would take out to swap the switch as it gets replaced. Wrong slide. So change management. It starts off with a request for the change. The second is the impact analysis. On the third option, you do have, there is another option here. You can approve the change manager, which is generally someone either sitting kind of like off to the side of either OT or IT, or could be embedded in either OT or IT. They're generally a non-technical person that just looks at what's going on, makes sure that that all the bases are covered, and that that's an appropriate time to do the change. There is a third option to number 3 that's not on this slide, and it is delay. So you can approve it based on the given metrics that the change was submitted on. You could deny it outright, or you could delay it. The fourth step is to actually do the change, and the fifth would be to review and report on the change. Is there anything from this change that we could do better for the next change of a similar type? So in our example, the comms personnel would submit a request for change to say that they would like to swap out the switch and when. The impact analysis might look at the requested time, know that the communications with the substation would be lost, and might check whether there's any switching programs or similar planned work at that substation involving SCADA that might be interfered with if the change went ahead. If not, it would get approved, and the control room and SCADA personnel would be notified of the outage. And that's one of the key, I think, for me, at the beginning of step 4 is the notification to say, hey, this is what we are actually going to do at this time. Notified of the outage, and then the switch would be swapped out and monitored for, X days, hours, minutes, whatever metric that you use to ensure that the changed out switch has solved the initial problem. Part of this process would be to ensure that the switch now changed out is replaced by the spare switch in the asset management system. So with asset management, this isn't really only an IT asset lifecycle management. You guys have probably seen similar slides before for pretty much any asset. You have a need, you plan for that need, you develop and acquire the solutions for that need, you then integrate it in, you maintain and upgrade it, and then you retire it. The same thing can go for any primary or secondary asset within the utility space. So we're not going to kind of delve into a lot of asset management topics, because that could be a whole another topic actually. Most of the managements that we're talking about could spin off an hour session long each. But from what we're leading into in my example, with asset management, it would be that the change management process leads into this in the maintain and upgrade slide. And I think the biggest takeaway for asset management is that service management platforms and softwares generally include, very robust configuration management databases, or what is called CMDBs. And you can use that database to track assets across your system. In fact, if you have a configuration management database well organized and well filled out, it will make all the previous managements a lot easier, because you can, select down to the finest detail of what an incident is. You can have, the hardware was the Orion, the problem was with the, say the network card, or, the problem was with the switch, but yeah, I think you get the idea. I unfortunately, in my experience, have seen a lot of corrupt access databases and Excel spreadsheets that have held inventory and asset information, and they haven't been backed up. They're actually kind of accessed off shared drives, so that when they got corrupted and the shared drive wasn't backed up, they got kind of lost, and you can lose some information by doing that. And I think, this configuration management databases are generally backed by something like a MySQL or an Oracle or a Postgres database to ensure some robustness. And the configuration management database, within the asset management, can also store information about firmware levels of, of say the Orion and the Bytronics products, as well as warranty information, location, and all sorts of different items that you might want to know about the particular asset. And talking about firmware levels, that kind of leads on to patch management. So I think patch management is the place where all the good stuff happens when you're upgrading things. It can feed into change management, say when a new Orion firmware is available. You can plug in, hey, Orion has now available the 9.8 firmware when it is available. And then the asset manager, so the patch management software, well, patch management part of the software can look at all the fields in the asset management software and go, well, now you have, these 50 Orions out of date. Reporting and compliance are kind of really two sides of the same coin. You can run the reports for internal checking, but you'll also likely to be running the same reports to send to compliance to make sure, firmware levels are at this level. That means it's safe and secure, and there are no, NERC changes required for these firmware levels that we're currently on. The best thing about the reporting, I think, is that it can alert you automatically, and it can, highlight in different colors, which devices need the most attention for an update purpose. So the summary of the service management is I think, these type of procedures can make it easier. I know in my experience at Western Power, it did help. As much as we were resistant to a little bit more paperwork, sometimes it was onerous. Sometimes, you get a call, sort it out, sort the issue out within, 30 seconds and then spend 2 minutes writing the incident down in these service management softwares. But it's generally a good idea. It also allows for, tracking of time spent supporting the system, which, IT might not be completely familiar with. A quick fix could take 30 seconds or it could take 5 hours depending on what the problem is. And it's kind of also a good way to track employees' time on when they're working on things like within service management. I think, I don't know, especially as regards to incident management, before our IT OT integration at Western Power, I do remember getting multiple calls at, the dead hours of the night between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. with a certain problem that, I know that I had fixed before, that we had never kind of written any notes down about what the resolution was. So you're kind of almost back at square one trying to solve problems when you can barely see the script, barely see the monitor. But with the incident management, all the records of previous incidents are there that can help you and keep a record of that. And I think that comes in handy, especially during those situations. And I think problem management, if you have someone analyzing the different incidents and making the problems for you, which is a great way to leverage the IT people, it can help, home in on common issues and make it easier to solve and make sure that there is no, bugbears that is just continually griping, both IT and OT staff. I think change management as well can keep everyone informed about different potential outages within the OT and IT sphere. I think the key process with change management is the communication to make sure everyone's on the same page. Change management is also useful for compliance purposes as well. Auditors, generally like to see that, hey, especially with firewall changes or IPS or IDS changes, hey, have you gone through the right procedure to be able to verify that this IP address you are now letting through the firewall is valid? What is the business purpose behind this? Auditors love to see that. And I think asset tracking keeps things organized, especially with the asset management system with a configuration management database. It's good to know where everything is and where your spares are. With the accountability section, I mentioned this as a pitfall, but I believe it can also be a benefit, depending on how the integration and convergence is done. With the shared responsibility of managing, say, an OT network, it can be frustrating, but it can be beneficial. When you're trying to complete a complex problem or solve a taxing technical problem that maybe it's in the OT environment, but IT may have people that are experts in it. Say maybe it's a printer that's being a bit weird or something like that. They can help do that kind of stuff where we're more focused on the operational technology side. And I think that's a good thing. When responsibility for things, like engineering workstations or the network itself gets shared, that everyone can be on the same page and you can kind of feed off each other to achieve a smooth running system as well as a better secured system as it regards to the cybersecurity aspect. With the delineation, which is kind of the other flip of the coin, in my mind, there are 3 levels of integration when it comes to IT and OT. There are things, wholly owned and run by IT. There are shared components. An example of a shared component, might be the firewalls or the IDS, IPS in between the IT and the OT environment. And there are things which, can be wholly managed by OT, like say the Orion Web Service Scaler or the Orion ITUs or electronics equipment out in the substation and beyond. And I think a clear delineation of responsibility, it does lead to less frustration amongst both teams. So due to the technical glitches that we were having before, I did have some polls and I have not actually done any of the polls. So I am going to launch just maybe a couple of polls in a row just for kind of our benefit to kind of see where everyone is, where all the attendees are kind of are in relation to the subject. So I'll just launch this one. Is your utility or utility customer going through an integration? All right, I'll close that poll down now. Surprisingly, 62% of the participants have it in progress, which, I actually think that when integration starts, it never actually stops. In my opinion, I'm not sure what everyone else's experiences have been. Now, this is the next poll is about bad experiences. Have people had any bad experiences in general when it comes to integration with the IT? We'll send these poll results out as well with the follow-up email. All right, I'll close this poll. 60% have had a few, about 30% have had many, and 14% haven't had any problems. I want to hear from those 14%. My email will be shared at the end of the webinar. And the next one about good results is it's basically like the flip. I imagine that we're going to see a flip of the last poll. I'll close that poll down. Thank you all for your responses. I am actually very interested in hearing your guys and girls' experiences in this particular thing. So yeah, definitely feel free to reach out to me. So this, the use of LDAP and Active Directory, actually kind of Jeremy pretty much already covered this while I was offline. It will be GUI based as you saw. Especially the Active Directory part can allow IT to help with the access control of the Orion. And that can be a good thing because you can do, with Active Directory, it can be very finely grained control. Bob may be able to view pages but not control anything. Sarah might be able to only, have a look at alarms and touch nothing. It's fairly simple to configure on the Orion side. It's definitely harder to configure on the IT side, which is, it's great to handle that off. Fully supported by NovaTech, and there is no additional license requirement for that. The radius update for the Orion, Jeremy also kind of covered that previously. Definitely, GUI based as well. As you could see, it was simple to configure. It's fully NovaTech supported. No additional license requirement again. There is, as far as I have been told by our marketing department, anything security related with the Orions will always come free of charge. The Radius integration with the RSA secure ID for the second factor. So Jeremy showed you with the phase 1 of the PEAP. Phase 2 allows for the GTC encryption type. And that does allow passcodes to be sent along with the passwords, which can be very handy for people who want to use multi-factor authentication. I have not yet. I was going to try and get a Radius server to talk to a Google Authenticator because you can use the same thing with that. But if anyone is interested in that, I will probably try that a bit later on. I wasn't able to complete this in time for the webinar. And you have already seen this. Jeremy showed you that live. Someone wanting to say something?
Yep, sorry, I'm getting my microphone ready. Anyway, we had one question come in that I just wanted to address from the chats, and it said, how are these radius settings going to be backed up during one of the web GUI backup processes through the sysfiles.zip? And the answer is, I believe, is that those settings are going to be saved within the sssd.conf or configuration file. So those settings will be buried in there. We had a sequential question to that says, can you selectively restore those settings without that file? As far as the web GUI interface goes, the answer is no. However, if you were to manually go in to that sysfiles.zip and then remove that file from there, then it would back up this or restore the settings, I should say, without that configuration. So a little bit of a manual intervention for that process, but it is possible. So sorry, back to you.
Yeah, you're fine. So to wrap up, I haven't actually mentioned mapping of processes before. If you are going to go through or are going through at the moment and IT-OT integration, I think it's kind of necessary, and you can get IT's help with this when it starts to begin or, midway through, is to map out all the processes. Find out exactly what you are doing because you will be surprised with how much you actually know is what I came to the conclusion of. And I think, having generally, because these type of integrations and convergences are pushed down all the way from the top, I think it's important for OT to kind of have a conversation within each other about what you actually want from IT. And if you go with that rather than IT, coming in hardball and going, okay, we're taking over everything. That is what they tried to do at Western Power. I'm not sure your experiences, But yeah, it's always good to, in my mind, to have expectations of what you want out of the relationship, and then be forward with solutions to problems, because there will be a few problems. And the next is advice for OT personnel. Be mindful and be respectful of the operational technology, people and their environment. They have been running it for years before IT came along and decided to try and converge or integrate. Always try and find ways to help. OT have a unique set of problems, and there are things which IT can help with. And, once again, people with solutions. I think, I think the biggest change for an IT OT integration is a lot of, some of it's technical, some of it's process, but a lot of it is kind of like a social change with how everything and how everyone is working together. So that is the conclusion. Are there any more questions about the subject?
Nothing in the chat, so if anybody has anything left, now is the perfect time to send in those last questions. And unless we see anything else come in, which I still have not, Ryan, I think you are good.
Cool. You want to take over for the last slides, or you want me to?
Oh, keep going.
Okay, so just a reminder for everyone, we have our Power Support community. There is the webpage there. It hosts all the webinar recordings. This will be uploaded within a few days, I think, and released sometime next week. We have all the documentation, and we have firmwares, I think, on here as well. So sign up for that. And this is my contact information and also Sean's contact information if you have any questions about this webinar. And with that, I think we are done. I sincerely apologize for the internet troubles that I was going through earlier. Thank you for being patient with me with that one. Thank you, everyone.